My name is Akira Drake Rodriguez. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am a faculty member in the Department of City and Regional Planning at the Weitzman School of Design. This series is supported through the generosity of the Weitzman School of Design, the Center for Hispanic Excellence, La Casa Latina, the LGBT Center, the Provost's Excellence Through Diversity Fund, and many students, staff, and faculty who are working together to challenge traditional understandings of urbanism that emerge from white supremacist, capitalist, hetero-patriarchal framings of the urban. In conversation with activists, authors, poets, artists, designers, policymakers, advocates, and through contributions from a number of disciplines, we hope to link these disparate fields and places into a narrative that, while not cohesive, at least troubles our over reliance on technical approaches to the problems and opportunities of cities. The spirit of this series is in response to the crises of our times. At the time of the proposal, that crisis was the ongoing pandemic, as written in April 2020. As the pandemic ends for global North nations at the expense of our global South comrades, here in the United States, we return to our normal crises of slow and acute violence on gendered and race bodies and communities. Although we will grapple with these difficult topics, we want to be mindful of this as a space of mutual understanding and safety. We therefore do not condone racist, gendered, transphobic, homophobic, xenophobic, or ableist language, and we ask that you refrain from engaging in any language that may describe self-harm or the ideation of suicide. In an effort to build spaces of accountability, we will therefore monitor the Q&A and ask that you respect the moderation. Please enter your thoughts, comments, and questions into the Q&A box, as the chat is not enabled for attendees. Although I guess it is, since you all talk to us. If you're comfortable using your name, we will read that out as well. With that said, I would like to turn it over to the directors of two critical cultural centers for the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Erin Cross is the director of the LGBT Center and adjunct faculty in the Graduate School of Education, GSE, and affiliated faculty in the Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies program at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Cross is also an alum of the Penn GSE. Dr. Krista Cortez, director of La Casa Latina, is a scholar and organizer working to co-create transformative research and practices with marginalized communities in university settings. Dr. Cortez is also a Penn GSE alum with master's degrees in language and literacy, as well as teacher education. Thank you again for joining us, everyone. And now to Drs. Cross and Cortez.
I get to go first. First, thank you to all the folks behind the scenes who have been helping organize this, from La Casa, from Weitzman. You all are amazing. I specifically want to thank Karla and Crystal for joining us tonight too. This is a dream team that we dreamed, and it became a reality. So very excited about that. For those of you who don't know about the LGBT Center on campus, we consider ourselves a social justice space. We want folks to bring their whole selves to this space. We want to make good trouble, as John Lewis would have said. So in making good trouble, we also want to queer things. How do we queer things? We queer things by pushing at the margins, recognizing marginal identities, and really bringing to the fore voices that usually are not heard. And that is what's going to happen today in our symposium, our event. So come with me and help build a space that's based on love, grace, and learning, and keep queering it up. Krista?
Thank you, Dr. Cross. I just want to say, echo the gratitude for everyone who has been part of putting this event together. I hope that this is a space for folks in attendance to really think through the ideas of queering and what Latinidad is. At La Casa, we believe that Latinidad is heterogeneous, that it's inclusive, that it really pushes against borders and norms in thinking about what identity is. We are not one thing, those of us who fall under the umbrella of Latinidad. We are an ethnic group, but we are racially diverse. We come in all shapes and forms. And I think that is what this event, at least in part, is trying to do, is to push us to think more about what queer spaces are, and particularly what queer Latinx spaces can be. And so I am really humbled to be here and share space with Karla and Cristal. And I hope that you all find this space to be thought-provoking and restorative in some ways. So I'll pass the mic now to Tosin.
Hello, thank you for all for joining us tonight. My name is Tosin Omojola. I am a Master of Architecture student here at Weitzman, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. First and foremost, let me introduce our moderator for tonight, Karla Lizarraga. Karla is an educator committed to expanding access for historically undeserved communities. As the Associate Director of La Casa Latina, Karla has focused on supporting the holistic development of students in culturally nourishing ways. Her experience as a first-generation, low-income, and undocumented student navigating the Ivy League guides her commitment to equity and social justice. In 2013, she was part of the first cohort of teachers with DACA status in the country, and she taught 7th grade reading in Denver, Colorado. Karla holds a Master of Science in Education and a BA in Political Science from the University of Pennsylvania. Okay, our two guest speakers for this evening are Cristal Sotomayor and Karla Cornejo Villavicencio. So Cristal is a bilingual Latinx documentary filmmaker, festival programmer, and freelance journalist based in Philadelphia. Currently, they are in post-production on Expanding Sanctuary, an independent short documentary about the historic end to police surveillance in organized by nonprofit juntos and the Latinx immigrant community in South Philadelphia. Cristal is a 2020 If Then North Shores resident and grantee, 2020 DCTV Docu Work in Progress Lab, 2020 Justice for My Sister's Sci-Fi Screenwriting Lab Fellow, among many others. They serve as the programming director of the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival and are a co-founder of Presente Media. Formerly, Cristal was the communications and outreach coordinator at Scribe Video Center. Their journalistic background includes having written for ITBS, Al Dia, Y, and Documentary Magazine. They are a recipient of the Sundance Institute Press Inclusion Initiative, TIFF Media Inclusion Initiative, the inaugural International Documentary Association, and Magazine Editorial Fellowship, AARP Freelance Fellowship at NLGJA, the Association of LGBTQ Journalists, and the Landfest Next Generation Fund. Before introducing Karla, we're gonna play a first short clip from Cristal's upcoming short documentary, Expanding Sanctuary. For this evening is Karla Cornejo Villavicencio. Karla became the first undocumented finalist for a National Book Award with the publication of her debut book, The Undocumented Americans. Her book was also named by Barack Obama as one of his favorite books of 2020 and was selected as one of the best books of the year by the New York Times, Time, NPR, the LA Times, the New York Public Library, Book Riot, Vulture, and the Library Journal. The Undocumented Americans is also a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for the Best First Book. Karla has written about immigration, music, beauty, and mental illness for the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the New Republic, Glamour, Elle, Vogue, N+1, and the New Inquiry. She lives in New Haven with her partner and their dog, and she's a graduate of Harvard University and a doctoral candidate in American Studies at Yale. So I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm now going to hand it over to Karla, as we're privileged to have her read a bit of her book.
Hi, I'm going to read a bit of an essay I wrote for the New Yorker. Actually a little bit. It's called Bad Dream. Let me turn off my phone. If you are an undocumented person anywhere in America, some of the things you do to make a dignified life for yourself and your loved ones are illegal. Others require a special set of skills. The elders know some great tricks, crossing deserts in the dead of the night, studying the Rio Grande for weeks to find the shallowest bend of river to cross, getting a job on their first day in the country, finding apartments that don't need a lease, learning English at public libraries, community colleges, or from Fraser. I would not have been able to do a single thing that the elders have done. But the elders often have only one hope for survival, which we tend not to mention. I'm talking about children. I know it's not an anchor baby thing. Our parents have kids for the same reasons as most people, but their sacrifice for us is impossible to articulate, and its weight is felt down deep in the body. That is the pact between immigrants and their children in America. They give us a better life, and we spend the rest of that life figuring out how much of our flesh will pay off the debt. I'm a first-generation immigrant, undocumented for most of my life, then on DACA, now permanent resident. But my real identity, the one that follows me around like a migraine, is that I'm the daughter of immigrants. As such, I have some skills of my own. You pick them up young. Something we always hear about because Americans love this shit is that immigrant children often translate for their parents. I began doing this as a little girl because I lost my accent, dumb luck, and because I was adorable in the way that adults like, which is to say I had large friend eyes and a flamboyant vocabulary. As soon as doctors or teachers began talking, I felt my parents' nervous energy, and I'd either answer for them or interpret their response. It was like my little Model UN job. I was around 7. In my teens, I began to specialize. I became a performance artist. I accompanied my parents to places where I knew they would be discriminated against and where I could ensure that their rights would be granted. If a bank teller wasn't accepting their ID, I'd stroll in with an oversized Forever 21 blazer, red lipstick, a slicked back bun, and fresh Stan Smiths. I brought a pleather folder and make sure my handshake broke bones. Sometimes I appealed to decency, sometimes to law, sometimes to God. Sometimes I leaned back in my chair like a sexy gangster and said, "So you tell me how you want my mom to survive in this country without a bank account. You close at 4, but I have all the time in the world." Then I'd wink. It was vaudeville, but it worked. That's all. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It is truly a pleasure. And as Erin said, a dream come true in a way to have both of you here this evening. I want to begin this conversation by acknowledging the heaviness of these past 2 weeks. We have witnessed the results of gendered, sexual, and racial violence, which took the lives of 6 Asian American women and 2 others in Atlanta. On Monday, we have witnessed yet another mass shooting in Boulder, Colorado that ended the lives of 10 individuals. So again, as Akira shared, we hope that this is a space that is generative and uplifting, particularly for queer and immigrant communities of color and folks who are directly impacted by violent systems of oppression. We ask that you help us maintain that safety by not sharing descriptions of suicide, self-harm, or sexual violence in the chat at this time. Thank you. So let's get started with this conversation, and I very much hope that it feels like a conversation for all of us. So both of you, we've shared some snippets of your work, but for folks that may not have had the chance to interact with it more in depth, how would you describe it? And who would you say is the audience that you have in mind when you were creating it? And we can start however you want.
I just put Crystal on view so I could see them. I would describe my work as sounding exactly like me. It sort of sounds exactly the way that I sound like. You know, my friends who have read it often have listened to it on audiobooks because I narrate it. And so, which I find weird, like I wouldn't do that, but it's a choice, and they seem to like it because the book already has like an intimacy, but they like that. And I wrote it specifically for children of immigrants. I feel like a lot of books about immigrants are written for white audiences, and even if they are written by immigrants or by Latinx people or other people of color. I think it's like, it's just what we've been reared to do. And I wrote it specifically for children of immigrants.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I read your book and I saw so many similarities in my life and even like the film that I'm making right now. And I also made the film for other children of immigrants because I feel like I always try to find myself in the work that I do. And really, like, I would describe the film more as a film about a mother and her child, and a mother who is also a daughter as well. And that's really how I see it. Like, I don't really see it as much as a story about, like, you know, the issues that are happening to an immigrant community. I see it more as like a mother struggling for her daughters, who is also a daughter struggling to bring her own mom to this country. So yeah.
Thank you both so much. Yeah, I think that you both talk a lot about that relationship between children of immigrants and our parents. And I think you are part of those creators that are helping bring more visibility to these stories. And like I said, there's that growing visibility in literature and in film of queer, of Latinx, and of immigrant stories. But the film and publishing industry, we all know that they have ways to go. So I'd love to hear from both of you, how have you been able to find your footing within these industries to tell the stories that you want to tell, how you want to tell them?
Okay, I'll go first this time. So I think it was really hard for me to find a place in the industry. I do documentary, so at least it's not Hollywood. So it's not as, you know, difficult to penetrate that. It's really difficult to get a foothold in Hollywood. Like typically you have to start off as a crew member and then you kind of go up the ladder. But there's like a lot of Latinos and there's a lot of immigrants that do like grip work, like with lighting. And so it's like hard to kind of get out of that as well. So I do like independent film, which is pretty much like you have to fundraise for yourself and you really have to like promote yourself in your own work, because that's the only way that I can really get an in. But luckily documentary is a little bit more accepting and a little bit more diverse than narrative films. So I think that has made things a little easier, but at the same time, you know, I would really hope that we could have more like Latino superheroes, you know, something that I would really like. As much as documentaries are so important, I also think that that's important. And I would say like the way I got into this industry was really just like talking to everybody, like, and applying to like every single opportunity that I could. And then slowly you start to meet people over time, and going to like the film festivals, like you see everybody. Like if you go to True False or Double Exposure or even like Sundance or something, like every single year you'll meet like the same people, and that's how you kind of keep in touch with people. So in the end, film festivals will become your vacations. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think networking is very important. So when I was growing up, until recently, I was undocumented, right? And I was on DACA when I was, I think, in my like early to mid 20s. So I was fully undocumented when I was growing up, and I did a lot of internships, which at the time were not controversially then unpaid. And I grew up in New York, and it was like a dream thing for me because it was not a controversy then that media internships were unpaid. And so I could do them. And I lived with my parents. And so I just did a lot of internships. And I was lucky that I got them, but I also like worked really hard at getting them. And, you know, that's where you work your networking magic. You know, you send handwritten cards, you deliver things in person, you know, you have to be very charming, you know, and these are skills that you would you could use on making friends or getting dates. It was a choice. I chose not to. I chose to use it on internship people, and yeah, I didn't get paid, but my dad gave me money for a Metro card, and I brought my lunch from home, and I did internships, and then and I kept in touch with those bosses and with those colleagues, and I started working for free, writing for free, because you have to as a writer. You start off writing for free for like websites and like blogs, and then once I got my taxpayer ID number, I could start making a little money writing for small places, like $60 or like $100, $150 for that piece. And if you think it gets a lot more lucrative, you're wrong. But you just build up clips that way. I don't know if they're called clips anymore because you don't really write for print anymore, but you just build your name by writing. If you're here and you're in college and you want to write, and if you're good at it, like make sure you're good at what you're doing, and like make sure it's like not your mom who tells you you're good at it. Like make sure you're actually good at it. Like get someone who is good at capitalism and who's not a jerk who tells you you're good at it, like a professor or something, and then work really hard at it. Yeah, and then network, and then like keep those connections, like email people, not just when you need something, but like be like, this article reminded me of you, or, you know, happy Thanksgiving or something. Make sure that those interactions are genuine. Don't keep relationships with people that you hate. I think people can tell when you're using them and don't like that. And yeah, and then like you'll keep people around that you have real relationships with, and then they'll be like, hey, did you know that this job or whatever. But yeah, so like film festivals, you'll see the same people around, and in media, it's like the same people too. Like you'll see the same people who are writers. The piece that I published in the New Yorker was my first time in the New Yorker, but the piece that was like in print that was like on the other side of mine was written by a guy that I interned with at Harper's when I was 19, and he was 26, and it was his first internship. And he was right off a boat in Alaska. Like he was just working on a boat in Alaska, and I like taught him how to use a fax. And it was like, he's a war reporter now. And it's like, you know, it's like, it really is a small world. So make sure you're nice to people.
Thank you both for like breaking it down and kind of lifting off the sheet behind both of these industries that can feel really difficult to get in. But I think that both of you just made it like, no, that it's actually like any other industry, there are ways to penetrate it. And Karla, the unpaid internships, I remember my first one was, all of my friends were like, oh, I'm looking for a paid internship. I'm like, if you see an unpaid internship, you let your girl know. Everyone, I think, thought that my family was making way more money than I was, because I was just like, I need an unpaid internship. That's how I got to intern in DC, so that I could have some sort of experience on my resume. So thank you for talking about that. You just reminded me of those summers that my friends and I, we would like, all of my undocumented friends and I, we would like cram into a house and rent one room together so that we could make it with our very limited funds in the summer.
That's really cute. You know, it was like a lot of kids who had money, and then like me who could not go out to lunch with them for years. Like they would all go out to lunches together, and I would not be able to because I only got money for a Metro card. So I feel like there's a whole cohort of us who did prestigious internships because we could do unpaid internships.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is a special shout out to my friend Angel, who always pretended that he wasn't hungry so that we could share a meal together in those very expensive networking lunches that we got invited to. But to pivot a little bit, Karla, you start off your book with a quote that I absolutely love by Joan Didion, where you say, "A place belongs forever to whoever claims it hardest, remembers it most obsessively, wrenches it from itself, shapes it, renders it, loves it so radically that he remakes it in his own image." I'd love to hear from both of you. What would you say are the spaces and the communities that you both claim and shape, as well as those that claim and shape you?
Okay, like I'm not gonna try to claim Queens, but Queens definitely was important in shaping me because I was cooking yesterday and this is very specific. I was cooking yesterday and I got the recipe from Epicurious. And so I was inspired by the recipe, but then I, improvised. And then I was like, why does all my cooking taste like I was taught to cook by a Puerto Rican person? Not like a Puerto Rican person cooked it, but like I was taught to cook by a Puerto Rican person. And like, even though I didn't put cumin in this, it tastes like I put cumin in this. And like one of my good friends is a Puerto Rican raised in the Bronx, and his dad passed away a few years ago. And his dad was an amazing cook. And sometimes we joke about how his dad, his dad's spirit puts cumin in my food when I'm not looking. And the thing is, like, my mom came to America when she was in her, like, 22. She didn't know how to cook at all. My dad just had it would be like, she just knew how to make spaghetti, like just spaghetti, and she learned to cook from other Latinos in Brooklyn, and like in a very pan Latin, pan immigrant, pan ethnic community. And so she does know how to make typical Ecuadorian meals, but she knows how to make food from other nationalities, like for like typical dishes from other. So like the food, like my palate is so influenced by from different communities, because that is the community that I grew up in. So I also have like a close friend of mine who's Jewish and grew up in West Hartford, had a bar mitzvah. I know more Yiddish than he does. I did not know it was Yiddish until I was like well into adulthood. And I was like, I mean, this is English, this is New York slang. And it was like, no, honey, this is Yiddish. It's just like, it was my neighborhood. And I'm already dropping consonants. Like, it's just my neighborhood. And I'm very proud of that, because I have a very easy time putting myself in other people's shoes and just thinking about what their lives are like, because I can imagine what their lives are like. And something that's always been meaningful to me is that in my community, in my neighborhood, we didn't all speak the same language. We weren't even all friends, but we all respected each other and we all looked out for each other's safety. And I think that's an important thing that maybe like Americans don't understand. Like, you don't have to like put the coexist sticker on your car, but you have to be able to respect each other's rights and each other's right to life and to peace and to love, and so I definitely carry that with me, and I learned that since childhood.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely grew up in a completely different environment. My family moved around a lot for my dad's job. And so then in the end, we ended up in Western Pennsylvania. It's very rural. There's a lot of cows. I was like pretty much the only Latina in my school, and probably, amongst us, there were like 4 or 5 people of color in a class of 300. So I grew up in a completely different way. I definitely don't claim that as my community. They've definitely like shaped me. Like, I see a lot of the trauma that I've experienced there, being like one of the only people of color, and also not only like person of color, but also like a femme person in a femme body, being in these spaces. It's definitely shaped me a lot, and the way that I see myself, I see my culture. But it's also made me very proud to be like Latinx. It's made me so proud to be like Peruvian American. Like, it's made me so like thankful to have my culture, to have Spanish, even though I speak mostly Spanglish. But really, like, I think what I claim is the community in Philly that I've formed, and everybody there, like the Latino community, you go to South Philly, that's like home for me now. That feels right to me. So they've definitely shaped me probably in a more positive way. And so, yeah, that's part of the reason why I made the film as well, is because like I really wanted to find a place to be, you know, that wasn't a place where I didn't feel totally welcomed. You know, I didn't really feel that growing up. So I'm glad that I found, you know, I found some of my best friends working on this film. So I'm really thankful.
Yeah, I mean, what both of you have shared has just kind of like sparked different thoughts. Karla, your experience in Queens reminds me of this quote that I just remember from this third grade textbook that my dad made me learn from, in Mexican textbook, so that I would really learn Spanish. And it was El respeto mutuo es la paz, which was said by Benito Juarez. And this idea that it's like, look, I don't have to love you, I just have to respect you, and I'll let you be, you let me be, and that is peace. And that's kind of like been my own experience in some of the communities that I've been a part of here in the US. And Cristal, very similar to you, I think for me, Philadelphia was one of the first places where I felt safe, or a semblance of safety, as an undocumented Latina. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, around Phoenix, Arizona, in the height of SB 1070. So I just had a lot of like anger and a lot of fear. And Philadelphia was the first place that I felt loved, where I felt like I could breathe a little bit lighter. So it's definitely been a place that has formed so much of like my own ideas of community and connection, and really like being undocumented and unafraid and unapologetic. So thank you both for reminding me of that. But around this idea of kind of finding those spaces, finding those communities, I think that it's a pretty common struggle for folks that identify as queer, as Latinx, or as belonging to immigrant communities. And it's something that so many of us are really contending with right now. Could you both share, as artists who are part of the communities that you do your work about, how do you take care of yourself? And if you could talk about any boundaries maybe that you have had to establish to prioritize your own mental and physical well-being.
Cristal, I'm going to let you go first because I want to make a list.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the hard thing about making a documentary is like, you have to like be there and film the thing that you're trying to make the film about. So sometimes like there were some like really sad moments. Like I've heard some really sad things filming in Juntos. I'm really glad that I was there, and I really appreciate those moments, but they were also very difficult to film. People talking about their lives and their families, and you know, things that have happened to them. And so that's very hard. But at the end of the day, I kind of just try to think about the positive, like what's going to happen with this film, and the possibilities of like this film, you know, helping other people and similar policies of police surveillance in their own communities. You know, for reference, like in the film, we talk about the PARS agreement that the city had with ICE to give ICE access to the police databases. And that was leading to a lot of detainments and deportations, because if you had like, you know, an interaction with the police would have your information, and then possibly ICE will also have that information. So, you know, that was really hard to film sometimes, and it was very hard to rewatch to find the right moments to include. You know, I cry every single time I see the film. I cry every single time I talk to Linda about the film. But in the end, you know, as much as there's a lot of sad things that happen, it's a really happy story. They ended up winning, and they ended up, you know, ending a policy that was really affecting their community. It was affecting, you know, families, it was friends and everything. And so, you know, it's been really difficult, but I think what helps is to really focus on the story and then the overall end goal, you know, to really make sure that other people know that this is happening, because it's really hard to visualize a database. It's really hard to visualize like your information going from one place to another. So yeah, I think in the end, it's just, I've had to focus a lot on the intended impact and it hopefully reaching other people, so that all the sad stories that I filmed and all the sad things that are in the film, you know, it ends up being really positive. And then I hope when people see it, they get a really positive response from it and change things for the better, I hope. So that's what keeps me going after all these years.
I also I also feel sad when I talk to my subjects or when I write. But you know, the hard thing, you know, one of the reasons people respond to my book is that I'm like, I'm not a journalist, so I can do things journalists don't do, like not follow their rules. So I can be unboundaried with my subjects and I can have these really close relationships with them, and I can fundraise and I can try to save them. And then I'm like, you know what happened? So I wrote this book and people really loved it. And they were like, it's fantastic that she was able to have these lack of boundaries with her subjects and, you know, and was able to write these stories. And the thing is, I wrote this book and I wrote it once. And it exists now, and we have it, and we have these stories now. And I don't have to do that again. And I can't do that again because it would destroy me. And luckily, journalists have these rules. And a lot of journalists would still have like no capacity for empathy because they're not from these communities. And also, I think a lot of people don't have the capacity for empathy that I have, which I'll go to in a minute. So the point is, like, I've learned boundaries. I've learned boundaries with my parents. I've learned boundaries with my subjects because it's important as a self-preservation. If I want to have a long career as a writer, I need to protect my mind and my spirit. If I want to have a long life as a human being and as a person of color and as a queer person, we need to respect our spirit. Like, obviously there's a lot of burnout among activists, but, you know, among writers of color who are writing about race and who, you know, often that because of intersectionality, you know, we are writing about race and about all the things that come along with that. Of course there's burnout too, and we don't discuss that enough. And so when we talk about like why there aren't enough artists of color, it's like, well, there's like institutional barriers, there's like resources, but also like how the mental health toll that it takes on us, right? When I do interviews, when I do press, like they're not really asking me about my art, they're asking me about my family, they're asking me about my community, they're asking me about immigration policies. It's really emotionally exhausting to do that press. My friend Jonathan Franzen does not get asked that. And so I have borderline personality disorder, and I'm very open about that. And what that essentially is, it's an emotional deregulation, and a lot of it is like there's a genetic predisposition, but there's also a lot of it that stems from childhood trauma, and so it takes a lot of hard work, mental health. So what we've sort of been told is that, you know, the solution to it is like self-care, and that self-care should like be gentle, and that it should be like being easy on yourself. And what I've learned is that it's sort of extremely hard work. I think a lot of children of immigrants, I think a lot of women, a lot of Black women, I think there's a lot on our backs. And there is this pressure to perform nonstop. And for those of us that are in careers that are like outward facing, you know, people who are, I mean, us, right, who are in front of cameras or classrooms or whatever, crowds, the performance element sometimes we're not sure who we are anymore. And I think it's important to take stock of that. But I've learned a couple of things. So one of the skills that I've learned through the therapy that I practice because of my, not practice, but the therapy that I do called DBT. It's called opposite action, which is one of the things that has been most effective for me, which is like, if I'm like lying in bed and I've read something in the news about like, that's been really horrible, or about immigration that's really horrible. Like I've recognized that it's like, it's self-destructive to keep reading and to keep clicking and to read those threads, you know? And the opposite action is like, what is the exact opposite feeling that I'm feeling right now? And what is the exact opposite action that will get me there? And so the opposite feeling is like, I could dwell on this feeling, which is feeling sad and feeling like empty and feeling sorry for myself, and indulge that by like listening to a sad Taylor Swift song. Or like the exact opposite feeling of that is like feeling empowered and feeling strong and feeling like I can protect myself and I can take care of myself. And the exact opposite action of that would probably be getting out of bed, taking a shower and listening to like Bad Bunny or something. And then like I'll count to 10 and then I have to do it. And it's sort of like acting your way into the opposite feeling. And I've learned how to do that, which is extremely hard. But as someone who suffers from like depression and the effects of trauma, which a lot of us who have had an undocumented life in this country or have experienced systemic racism have, it's been absolutely life-changing. I would say those two things, knowing how to action my way out of my feelings, and boundaries have been really life-changing.
Thank you so much. I feel like I just got like a snippet of free therapy with that. So I very much appreciate it. As someone who has gone to therapy and is still very much in the process of unpacking like the trauma around being undocumented, because I think so much of it is like being in survival mode or helping my parents survive, that just even acknowledging the pain and the struggles or like what we've had to do to survive is, I'm like, I feel like if I really acknowledge it, I'm gonna fall apart. So thank you both for naming those boundaries that you place for yourself, for the ways that you protect yourselves. We've all kind of touched a little bit upon like family. So I would love to hear a little bit from both of you around like the relationships of children of immigrant parents, and how as children of immigrant parents, we often feel indebted to our parents because of the sacrifices and the traumas that they've experienced in this country. I know that I have felt this very much so, and I know a lot of the students that I work with here at Penn have often expressed this, where they feel like they have to pay back their parents, or they have to hide certain parts of themselves, like their queerness or the things that they're really passionate about, kind of to not cause any additional stress to their families. What advice would you all give to parents, to students that are carrying these feelings towards their parents?
I mean, I would say that to recognize that, God, I mean, I talk about this so much, but I don't know the advice I would give them is to make boundaries with their parents, but I know that's easier said than done. I mean, first I would tell them like, I don't know. Look, it's been a long journey for me. I definitely have felt that I had to pay my parents back. And the other day I was writing something and I was like, you know, my mom's a narcissist, but nobody would ever call her narcissist because one time she came to America to give up her life for me, like one fucking time. And I thought that was pretty funny. And I made myself laugh so hard. But, you know, like it's true though. It's like, you know, she was really young and she did not know that she was going to do that. And that doesn't mean she is allowed now in her mid-50s to call me in the middle of the day whenever she wants to, and like sort of let it slip that she thinks my dad should die. You know, like that is toxic behavior and that is unboundaried and that's mean. And I'm allowed to tell her, like, you can't do that to me. He's my father. And and so, you know, it's like you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say, don't say that. You're allowed to say, don't call me all the time. So, you know, just you're allowed to be a person. You're allowed to have your own life. I would say recognize that your parents probably came to this country and have probably, you know, reached a certain age having not pursued their own dreams, not pursued or even known what their own dreams are or what their own goals are, what their own lives are. And that's sad. And that's not on you. That's like a lot of factors that go beyond you and that have to do with countries and politics and laws and systems. And you can't change that with a diploma. You can't change that with a career. You can't change that with money. You can be financially, you can help your parents out. You can help them, but you can't solve that. And I can tell you that you can't solve that with money and that you can't solve that with grades and diplomas. Like I can tell you that from experience, and that it'll never be enough, and that you can't solve them and you can't fix it for them, and you can't get those years back for them. You can't give them their youth back. And what you can do though is fuck up your own life in an attempt to do so and lose your own life and make sure that you don't know your own goals and you don't know your own dreams and you don't know your own person outside of living for other people. And you can replicate what your parents did and lose your own life to the American dream and living for other people. And that would be a waste to lose multiple people's lives to that. And that's called intergenerational trauma. And you should not replicate that. So I think, the first baby step to that is like making sure that they don't have access to you 24/7. And you could be like, maybe text me, or I'll text you, or I'll call you. But, don't call me while I'm at work, or don't call me while I'm in Zoom class, because I know that they like to. So just start off with baby rules to protect your mental health. That's what I would say.
Wow, that's such good advice. I would say, I agree with everything that you said. I would also say that honestly, academia saved my life. Going to college and leaving the house, changed my life forever. I would not, I was so stuck. I was living in a rural area. You literally can't go anywhere unless you have a car. I wasn't allowed to get a driver's license. There were only, my mom had her car, my dad had his car, and that was it. You don't get a car, nothing. My brother, on the other hand, he's younger than me, but he's a boy, so he got everything, and I didn't. And so really going to college on the other side of Pennsylvania, 6 hours away, 7 hours away, was the best possible thing that could have happened to me, truly. So I made sure I did not want to go to anything in Pittsburgh. I was like, that's too close. I wasn't really allowed to leave the state. So I went to Bryn Mawr, 8 hours away driving, perfect, on a campus that was pretty close to the city. So really that helped me so much. Just physically being away from that space was the best possible thing that could have happened to me. I still felt a lot of pressure to perform and do what my parents wanted me to do. I was pre-med, my parents, you know, like every immigrant child's like, hey, you have to be like a doctor or a lawyer. And so I was ready to be pre-med, but I hated it so much. And I changed to comparative literature to study English and Spanish literature. And because I was so far away, there was nothing they could do. So truly, like, the distance was the best possible thing I could have done. And I was like in an institution, like nothing could happen to me, like nothing bad could happen to me while I was at Bryn Mawr, because it's like on a campus in my dorm, and I get my meals there, and I have my job on campus. So literally, as soon as I was 18, like I was financially independent. And like that was the best possible thing that could have happened to me. I still have issues, you know, putting boundaries between my family, but I really think distance and time away and like not talking to them for a while really helped a lot. And like writing and journaling like helps so much. Just like not being in the same space as them, the same city, the same, it was like the most liberating thing ever.
Yeah, hard relate to everything. I think it was so mind-blowing the first time that I live in Philadelphia. I went to college in Philadelphia. My family lives in Arizona. And realizing that I could actually just not answer the phone, or if my parents, I just didn't have to tell them where I was going or at the time that I was going. I think the first time that that happened, it's kind of wild to think that that was a realization, but it really was, that I'm like, oh, my parents don't have to know everything. I'm actually an adult now in this way. But yeah, the process of setting up boundaries is definitely an ongoing one. And for students here at Penn who are in this event, if there's ever a time that I can help you navigate those boundaries or give you a script, more than happy to do that. So as we wrap up, and this is for folks too, if there are other questions, I saw some in the chat, so we'll pivot to those. But my last question for the both of you is, what's next for you and your work? And what are some of the questions that you hope your work explores or even answers? And where can folks here continue to engage with that work?
I have a novel maybe coming out next year for young adults called Dream Girl. And then there is a book on cults coming out the next year after that. It could be for young adults. I mean, I don't know. My writing is all young adults are welcome into my writing. And I keep people posted on Instagram. If I don't announce it on Instagram, it's not true. Okay. So don't believe people out there, because someone once wrote that I had fuck ice tattooed on my arm. Okay. So I do have boundaries with my parents, but my mom wouldn't like that very much. And they're okay with the finger tattoos. My dad said that it looked like I was an MS-13. My father said that. Okay. And, but fuck ice is a step too far. It was eyeliner. So if it doesn't come from my Instagram, it's not true. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I love that. If it doesn't come from my Instagram, it's not true is now like something I'm gonna say. So yeah, I would say if you want to engage with me, Instagram as well. And what's next? I hope we can finish the film and premiere it next year. And then I'm working on like a really short little film, like animated, with this really incredible artist called Daniel de Jesus. They're like a really amazing performance artist and musician and painter. And we're working on this short about like COVID and Latinidad and kind of like Alice in Wonderland, sort of, you know, trying to get COVID test weirdness. Like it's kind of strange, but yeah, we're hoping to finish that up by the end of the year, and then hopefully premiering Expanding Sanctuary next year. So yeah.
Thank you both so much. So here we have two questions from our audience. The question for Karla is, how did you make sure to not write for white people and specifically for children of immigrants?
So at first, I did write for white people in an angry way. So I sort of imagined that it was sort of like Oprah's book club type of readers would gravitate towards my book. Can you imagine the naivete of thinking that Oprah's book club would be interested in my book? But then my editor, my book editor, Chris Jackson, I almost, the words that just came into my mind was, he is a fine looking man. He is a fine editor. He is a legendary editor. And he called me out. He said, "You're writing for a white audience and you're being defensive." And my introduction, it was very much like it was really something. And he told me to cut it out, and he said that it was bad writing. I mean, and so my editor runs an imprint called One World, and it's mostly writers of color. It's mostly Black writers. He edits Ta-Nehisi Coates, famously, and his authors don't do that. And so once we had that conversation, I mean, I couldn't do that. And so, you know, at the time that I was doing the reporting, I was carrying around James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, and it was small, it was a paperback, and I really felt like, you know, James Baldwin talked about how he had to come back from France, come back to the United States, and he really didn't want to do it. And something that's not talked about often enough is James Baldwin really struggled with his mental health a lot. And we want our writers of colors to sort of be icons and be really strong, especially Black men. And James Baldwin really struggled. And now, I didn't know that at the time, but he really didn't want to come back and have to write about what he wrote about. And he said that it was his duty and it was time to pay his dues. And I really related to that. And I felt like going on this journey to write this book was going to be hard on my mental health, but I had to, because I knew that only I could write this book, right? And so that's when I was like, I need to write a book that is what his book was for me at the time, which was something that made me feel safe and made me feel understood and made me feel witnessed. And it made me feel like I wasn't going crazy. And so that's when I was like, I hope that my book can be like that for children of immigrants, because we didn't have something like that. So that was my inspiration, but Chris Jackson would not have let me. And he is a fine looking man if you want to look him up.
Google image him after this. So thank you.
Yeah, you should.
Cristal, the question for you from our audience: do you think there is similar pressure to present a certain type of immigrant experience given the funding structure of documentary fundraising?
Yes, there is. I would argue that that's for like any like underrepresented community. Like there's one type of trans narrative, there's one type of like Latino narrative, there's one type of like Black narrative. Like that is so true. I think the idea of poverty porn is so deeply ingrained in documentary. I mean, if you look at like what's popular on Netflix in terms of documentary, it's like all the really terrible films that sensationalize violence or that sensationalize like bad things happening to communities of color mostly. And so it's really, really hard to get through all of that. I would say that things are changing for sure, because there's some really beautiful films that have come out this year, like Time. Time is Beautiful. It's on Amazon. Definitely watch it. It's like, in my opinion, like one of the best films of the year in terms of documentary. And then there's also, you know, like I would say one of my all-time favorite documentaries is like Memories of a Penitent Heart, about like this woman from Puerto Rico who kind of deals with a family secret that has been a secret in her family for a really long time. So I would say that things are definitely changing, but still it's like hard to break through all of that. I would say that there's like there's most recently, it's like in the new generation of filmmakers that are really trying to have films that have some equity in them. There's real questions from film festivals and from major distributors about like, do the people in your film even know that they're in your film? That was a major conversation like 2 years ago, because there was a film that premiered at a festival that one of the people who was in the film was in the audience and was like, I had no idea I was in this film. And so I would say that people are starting to ask the right questions. Like, did the people agree to be in this film? Do they know what's in the film? Are they okay with what's in the film? And so I would say things are changing, but I don't think it's changing fast enough. And I also don't think that funding accounts for the people that are in the film. Like it kind of sometimes would break documentary and journalistic standards if, you know, I were to give someone $5 because they needed $5 for the bus, and I'm filming them. Like I would get in so much trouble. Like people wouldn't even touch that film, you know, if I were to do that. So I think things really need to change. Like you need to pay the people that you're filming if they need it, you know, and you're also like taking up people's time to go over the cuts with them, to interview them. That can be like a full day sometimes. So yeah, I would say like hopefully things change, but I think that there's some really good examples of what the future could really look like. And I would say Time is definitely on Amazon Prime is one of those. I would say also there's a really beautiful film on Netflix that I can't remember the name of right now. Strong Islands. That one's also one of like my all-time favorite films. And those films like really, really inspire me. So things are changing, but they're not, you know, number one on Amazon. They're not number one on Netflix. And so it's hard when people don't see the beauty in that, and you're trying to sell it to people. And so instead they'd rather, you know, Netflix would rather buy another Tiger King than buy another, you know, film that's beautiful and artistic and like really just a thoughtful portrayal of someone's lived experiences. You know, it's hard.
Thank you both so much. We have one final question. Do you have any advice for how to unlearn something that was ingrained in you as a child by your family?
I mean, it depends what it is. I was taught a lot of things by my parents that I knew at the moment to be false, like facts that I was like, this seems false. Like my dad would point out lots of businesses and be like, this is a front. You know, he thought everything was a front. And at some point I was like, this seems like a lot of fronts, you know? And so, you know, at some point you are like, you research your own facts. So if this is something like, if this is something like about vaccines or something, you know, something that is researchable, you do your own research, you know, like my dad also has like theories about the moon landing, you know, and we had so many fights once I reached high school and I had internet access. I was like, you're wrong, you know? And he would be like, señorita abogada, you know, like little Miss Lawyer. And I would be like, if you're wrong, I'm not gonna let you think you're right. And so then I started arguing with him about everything, you know,
about like, I started wearing red nail polish and red lipstick, and he would be like, only prostitutes wear that. And I was like, prostitutes wear, you know? And I would be like, show him like Audrey Hepburn wearing that. I'd be like, we're in America, you know? So once if it's researchable, like research it and come to your own conclusion. If it's something about values, you know, traditions, and it's something about whether or not you agree with it and can come, and whether or not you want to continue practicing that. If it's like something to do with religion, you know, something like that, something about values, you have to decide whether that feels true to you too, you know? And that's not something you can ask Google. I would say ask yourself whether that aligns with your values. Something that I learned in my therapy program was like, to not apologize for things that don't compromise your values. And so I've been thinking a lot about what my values are. And a lot of them don't align with my parents. You know, some of them do, like justice, you know, taking care of people who are less fortunate than me, something that I share with my brother, something that my mother doesn't share with me. I specifically remember when I was like in high school, I made a big donation after there was an earthquake or a hurricane or some natural disaster. And my mom was like, we're poor too. And I knew that that was like a big difference that we were going to have, because even if we were poor too, I knew that I would always give. And I knew that, and then my brother too, he was the same way. And my mother was just different. And I knew that I couldn't change her. But that was, you know, she was always like, you have to take care of yourself first. And that was something that I sort of felt differently about. And so I would say, just examine yourself. Like, you already know, I think, the answer to the question, like whether you believe that or whether you want to unlearn it, or whether, I think you should just explore yourself and be honest with yourself. But that's a really good question, because I think most of our lives is spent on learning what our parents tell us about the world or about ourselves or about them.
Yeah, I think everything you said was on point. I would also say like time is like a big thing. Like some of the things that I'm like currently unlearning from my family took me many years to realize. And like, you just have to be patient with yourself. It's going to take you a while. And I think like distance is really, really important too. Like not living with them is like a big thing. Like once you stop living with your parents, like things get better. Surprisingly, you know, you still miss your family and you love them, but like your mental health gets better, your skin clears up, like the water tastes better, like truly. So I really think time and distance heals everything and will make you feel better. It'll make them feel better. You'll love each other more, honestly, once you're apart.
Well, thank you both so much, and to everyone here that joined the space. This has been truly delightful, and I hope that folks are feeling a little bit more loved, a little bit more comfortable with themselves. Have a lovely evening, and please take care. Un beso y un abrazo, and good night. Bye, y'all.